All right, welcome back to Michelle and Mickey's Performance Podcast. I apologize for my abrupt departure last week. I did lose power in that thunderstorm, and power was out for several hours. So thank you, Michelle. I did listen to how you finished that up. Perfect, as always. So thank you for finishing that up. But we're going to continue on with what we had hoped to talk about last week, which is races, post-race analysis. But before we jump into that, or maybe as a segue, how was your race this last weekend?
Yeah, so this will be my opportunity to do my post-race reflection. Like, we'll say it's live, although people can listen to it later. Yeah, so overall, I would say it did not go well. So this will be a really good example of, right, like how to do a race reflection when there's feelings of disappointment at the finish line, right? Which is common. Like, so if we go back, because I don't think I ever really talked about the third race in this series. So there were 4 races in the series, so the series is over now. I screwed up the second race, did a post-race analysis on that, I think here on the podcast. And then I went and I implemented what I wanted to do on the third race. And genuinely, like, it went perfectly. Like, I couldn't even, like, it just, like, I learned the lesson that I needed to learn. I implemented, and it just, it's funny because, like, my motto is it's not luck, but, like, sometimes there's some luck involved.
Of
like
course, of
like
course.
like
Yeah.
the circumstances of that third race really lent themselves to, like, me being able to follow my plan, like, really easily. I got on my feet, I did the thing, and I was like, oh, there's absolutely nothing I would change about that. So, like, and I was hoping to implement that again in the fourth race, and I didn't. And so the way that I look at race reflections is that I like to look at 5 questions. Right? So the first question is, what were your expectations going in? And I feel like that, like, sets the stage, right? Because, like,
Hmm.
it matters. That part really matters.
It
What did you
does.
expect? Like, and were your expectations realistic? Were they process focused? Were they within your control? If I said my expectations going in were to win my age group, well, like, that's not within my control. So, like, that's not the kind of expectation we're looking at. So when I say, like, what were your expectations going in, that really falls under, like, what can I control about this, right? And so I'm looking at, like, what is my fitness level? Where's my head at? You know, what have I done right? And what have I maybe missed in training or whatever, so that I can come up with a realistic, like, what were my expectations going in? And I would say, like, look, I've trained consistently with swimming. My swim fitness feels decent. Like, it doesn't feel amazing. Like, I'm not swimming like I was 10 years ago, but, like, I'm swimming decently well. So, like, my expectations going in were that I was going to have a good swim similar to the third swim, or, like, that I would be able to give that good effort. And then the second question that I ask is, how'd it go? And, like, in this part where we look at, like, how is your fueling? How is your pacing? How is your execution overall? What were you telling yourself? What was your mindset? Like, all that kind of stuff. So this is the part that people like to say. If we say, like, how did your race go? This is the part people always, like, the nuts and bolts of it, right? So I would say, I felt like I swam as strong as I could, but my problem was, is that I had some information that made me think that an outside line was going to be quicker on this swim, and it wasn't.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
so when I was doing the swim, I lined up on the outside, which is uncharacteristic of me. And I looked, and there were a lot of people on the inside. And apparently I heard this at the end, that the race director actually told everyone. They were standing up on the beach, and the race director said to everyone, hey, I think the inside line's going to be quicker on this race, so your best bet is
Oh,
to stay inside. And meanwhile, I'm, like, probably taking too much for granted, right? I've done this race 20 times. Had a plan
right.
that I decided beforehand, which I should have been more flexible in, deciding to
Hmm.
change it or whatever. And I was talking to somebody, as I do, right? There's 400 people on the beach, and, like, I met, like, a potential new athlete, and we were just chit-chatting, and I was telling her all the things, and I ignored what the race director said beforehand. And so we're about to get in the water. It's a deep water start. I swim out to the, like, pretty much the furthest point, and I look, and, like, everybody's on the inside. I'm like, there aren't that many people out here. And I was like, I don't know why. Like, that should have been a sign. Like, I have enough experience to know that, like, that should have been a sign. But, like, I don't know. Wherever my head was at that day, it was almost like my confidence level was too high, or, like,
Mm.
my belief in myself was too high. And it wasn't, like, an arrogant thing. It was just like I feel pretty good about, like, this decision that I made of, like, the strategy that I'm going to take. And so when we started off, like, pretty much immediately I could tell, I'm like, oh, wow, this is hard. Like, I'm swimming, like, you can see reef underneath you. And I'm like, I'm
Right.
not moving, like, I'm going
Yeah.
really slow. And I had expected a tail current. And so the reason that I made my prediction the way that I did was because, like, I thought I knew when the high tide was. I had wrong information on that.
Hmm.
So I didn't know, like it was actually low tide when I thought it was high tide. But anyway, I thought the tide was going to be filling in and that we were going to have a nice tail current, like all the way. So I was just expecting like really nice, smooth sailing, perfect condition, easy swim
Hmm.
is what I thought. And then when I got in it, I was like, oh my God, like, what is this that's happening? Like, this is like one of the stiffest head currents I've ever swam in. And there were
Wow.
times where like, I'm looking down at this reef and I'm like, I'm pulling really hard and I'm not moving.
Oof.
Thought process at that time was like, oh, clearly like I was wrong about the way the water was going to be moving. I've had again, like I'm super experienced. Like I've had experiences like this before. Typically what happens is at the end, everybody has the same story. Like, oh my
Hmm.
God, that was so hard. Like the head current was ridiculous. It was so hard, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I used that experience or like those previous experiences to like just try to not get frustrated, just keep pulling hard. A head current is good for a stronger swimmer. And like the whole time I'm like, I'm pulling really hard. I'm working absolutely as hard as I can, but like I'm not moving very well. I could go on, but like the short story of that is that I got my ass kicked. Like that, it took me
Yeah.
like an hour or 12 or something to do that swim. And the people that I like usually swim with swam like 60 to 61 minutes. So I was like,
Wow. That's
I
a pretty big
literally got beat.
difference.
It was
Yeah.
like 12
Yeah.
minutes. I mean, like I knew I was swimming slow. I really thought everybody was. And at the end, I realized I was like, oh, you know what? Like the people that swam on the inside, they had a completely different experience. Like every
Right.
one of them was like, it was a beautiful swim. It was really nice. It was like, the water was clear and it is
Wow.
like, it was not that it was easy, but like they did not have the experience that I had. I found that to be really fascinating. Like, wow, what a lesson to know that the conditions on the North Shore of Oahu, and this probably translates out to like other places too, because it
Hmm.
makes sense that like the water has to be moving in different directions. Because if it was all moving in
Hmm.
the same direction, that would be a tsunami.
Right.
Floored at how big of a difference it was, because I mean, I like it. It took me 12 minutes longer than it should have. I think, and so yeah, I just fully got my ass kicked in that, and so like
So, go ahead.
that's
Sorry.
how it went,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
how it
That's
went.
how it went. Yeah.
So like question three, and I would say I fueled beforehand. I ate my oatmeal on the way up. I had my gel right before I went in. So like there were no fueling issues. Pacing wise, I mean, I gave a solid effort. I gave my absolute best effort the whole time. And so that's what I would say that I did well. So question three that I ask is, what did you do well? So I feel like even when you're like, I'm disappointed. Like I got up on the beach and I was like, oh my God, that was a nightmare. What was that? I was disappointed. And that's okay, right? Like there's times where
Yeah.
like races go in a way where
Yeah.
you're like, I feel
That's
disappointed.
part of, yeah, it's part
It's
of
part of
racing.
it.
Yep.
But then I think it's really important to look and say, what did you do well? And I was like, I swam well, like for the line that I was on, like, so, the problem obviously is that I chose the wrong line, but like I swam hard. Like I pulled with hard strokes for 72 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I was exhausted at the end. Like I absolutely gave my very best effort and I didn't like give up on myself even when I knew that it was hard. Like I still like mentally I kept myself in it because I was imagining that everybody was facing the same scenario even though they weren't,
Which is, in
which is
hindsight,
good.
probably good, right? Like
It,
that
it was
maybe the,
yeah,
right. Like if you
yeah.
had known at the time, like that might have backfired, right? Like if you had magic goggles to see, oh my God, these people on these other lines that I can't get to, or it would be challenging to get to that. Like they're
I
swimming
totally
easier.
could
Right.
have gotten to him. So that's the thing. Okay. So
That's
like
true. Okay.
question
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
four is if you could go back and do it again, what would you do
Okay.
differently? And it's like, this is the one, oh my God. Like sometimes, I mean, honestly, the answer after the third race was nothing. Like I did absolutely, there was nothing I would change about that. This one, like, oh my God, without a doubt, there's so many places that I could have changed course, right?
Yeah.
Like I could have listened intently to the race director before we got in the water, right? I could have done that and I didn't. I could have just stuck with my instincts and everything I've done for the last like 15 years, like stay inside line, like almost always inside line here is faster. It was dumb of me to think that like some magic thing was going to make this one day different. it wasn't different. But then like the third thing is that even in the middle of the race, like I knew I was stuck in a head current. So like literally if I would have just stopped, turned left, swam 100 meters in, and then I probably
Right.
would have saved 8 minutes, even in the middle of the swim, because you can
Right.
see, like when I look at my file afterward, you can see sort of like the stickiest 500s, right? Because like my watch is
Right.
beeping every 500 and you can see the pace. I mean,
Right.
there were a couple of 500s that were 11 to 12 minutes, which like normally I would be like 7:30 to 8 minutes.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, like a
Yeah.
500 is taking me 3 minutes longer than it should. Like that's telling, right? So like so there were several places with it, like even within the race, like I should have been more open-minded to changing my strategy. And instead it was like, I made my choice and I'm sticking with it in a stubborn
Hmm.
ass way. It was so stubborn, but I did. Looking back, I was so stubborn, like, oh my gosh. So yeah, there's lots of places that I could have or would have done something differently. And then the last question, which I feel like is important too, is like, how do you want to move forward? Right? Like, what's your next step? And so the next step is which is funny. So there's one more race. There's several more races, but there's a 5K swim that's up there this Saturday. And it's not part of the series. It's just sort of like an additional add-on for anybody who's like, I enjoyed that series. I'm going to keep going. And it's more of a standalone kind of thing. It's literally on exactly the same course, except it just starts like a mile down the beach longer. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be like the same thing we did on Saturday, but longer because you start further back. So it's still point to point. And it was funny because while I was out there swimming and thinking that everybody had a head current, I was like, oh my God, why did I enter that 5K? This is so hard. Like, I don't even like if I can make a 5K in this current. Like, it was so
Right.
hard. And I thought if I would have known it was going to be like this, like, I don't think I would have entered that 5K. I mean, these are the thoughts that are going through my
Right.
head.
Right.
But then when I finished and realized that, like, oh, on the inside line, they didn't have that head current.
Hmm.
2 days later, it took me until Monday to get to this headspace. So by the way,
Yeah.
like if it takes
Right.
you a couple days to like get to a new headspace, fine. I'm like, I have another chance. This is cool. I'm glad I entered the 5K because I have another
Hmm.
chance now. Because like it
Hmm.
wasn't like that I'm not a good enough swimmer to have a good race. It was that like I literally made a poor decision. It was very expensive. Like that was a big mistake of a decision. And then I didn't correct my course in the middle, but I have an opportunity to do it better on Saturday. And so I'm going to try to do it again on Saturday. And so like a final point that I want to make about all of this is that there are, and the reason that I can say this is because, hey, I've got like decades of experience doing this, and I have an opportunity to, I think I had like, I don't know, 6 or 7 athletes that were up there doing that swim.
Mm-hmm.
And, a couple of them had great swims, a couple of them didn't have great swims. They all made it, which was good. So like everybody was happy, but I wouldn't say everybody was happy. Like the ones that had a harder time with it were like, I'm not a good swimmer, right? Or like
Mm-hmm.
it was
Hmm.
like they're
They
taking it
internalize.
personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like where I could say that there's an element of, we'll call it like identity, of self-belief, of like your own belief in your self-worth that is separate from the way you perform in a race. And so like when I got out of that, when I got up on the sand and I saw 112, I was like, oh my God. And then when I saw that, like my peers literally swam, like, I'm like, what'd you swim? Like 101. Like, good job to you, first of all, congratulations. Like you did it right. I didn't. But what I didn't do was think, oh my God, I'm a terrible swimmer, or I don't belong out here. I'm like, I didn't take it personally. Like, I'm not a good person. I'm not a good coach. I'm not a good athlete.
Right.
I'm not a good, like, it was none of that. There is a difference between I made a bad decision and I'm a bad person. Right? And like they're totally two different things. And so the reason that I can like come on a podcast and talk publicly about this, yeah, like that didn't go well, is because like I'm not internalizing it to be like I'm a bad person, right? It's made a poor choice. So
Absolutely.
like in doing some of this self-reflection, and that's what we're really going to talk, like the rest of this podcast is largely going to be about like reflecting on races. But it extends so much further than that. And I feel like that's why reflection is such a valuable skill. And it is a skill, like definitely not everyone has it. I try to teach athletes, like I give them those 5 questions and like literally like there was an athlete that raced on Saturday and or Sunday. She did a triathlon, and I was like, how'd it go? What went well? And I know this athlete isn't like hasn't historically been great at reflecting on races, and like she doesn't like write copious notes with details.
Mhm.
Like I didn't get none of that. But I was like, "What'd you do well?" And the response was, "Bike." And
Woman of
I'm like,
words.
yeah, yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that's cool, right? So I'm glad you like felt good about the bike. But like when I'm talking about self-reflection or reflecting on your race performance or like specifically then what about the bike? I stayed aero the whole time. I kept my head down. I felt pressure from my feet into my pedals and felt like I could feel my legs working the whole time. Or like even when I was like climbing that hill on the bike and it got hard, like I talked my way through that and I stayed on, I stayed on
Hmm.
the power the whole time. And like on the downhill, I was really proud of myself because I stayed in my aero bars and I let myself let it fly and it felt really good and I felt confident. And like that's so different than like bike.
Yeah, like my speed, or my power. Speed is a big one. Like I look at that, either look at the speed that I went or look at how slow I went, right? Like and it is the least important metric for me in terms of how you actually performed on race day,
Yeah.
to be
Well, because
honest.
there's not a ton that you can like control about that. And so when we're looking at the self-reflective piece, the whole idea is the reason that we do self-reflection is so that next time, or even in training, right, that you can potentially make different choices, do something differently, or you can identify like, here's something that I didn't do as well as I think I could have. And so I want to work on that in training
Right.
so that I get better at that. Or even when there's something that you did do really well, right? Like I bombed
Right.
that downhill like I thought I was going to, like I've been practicing and training,
Right.
like staying relaxed and like really just like letting it fly on the downhill. And I did that. So I'm super proud of myself. And when you can reflect on that thing specifically, then like next time you've marked somewhere in your brain that like you're good at descending on your bike. So then like when you get to a downhill, now it's like this is just a skill that you have acquired that now you're good at. And so now you can like just let that happen and have your focus be somewhere else. And like, well, my weakness was, you know what, I really didn't want to sit up and fuel. Like I was in my
Mm.
aero bars and I had to reach back into my pocket to grab that thing of shoes. And I didn't want to interrupt my momentum because I felt so good. And so I made a decision to not do that. And that ended up being dumb because I ran out of steam on the run. Right. And so like when you can think about your race execution from those objective like standpoints of your experience, what you had during the race, then and look at it objectively and like, so guess what, that was a choice you made, that you chose to not eat the fuel because you didn't want to and I understand that. I remember that, like racing being like, well, I just like didn't want to come out of my aero bars, and it's like because I didn't want to interrupt my momentum. But the reality is that comes back and bites you in the ass 3 hours later if
Every
it's a long
time.
race.
Yep.
So it's like learning those lessons. It's like okay to make the mistake if you then identify what the mistake was, learn the lesson, and then do it differently next time. And like that's how we end up making progress. So anyway, I feel like I've been yapping for a long time, so I'll
No,
stop. But
no,
like
this was, yeah.
genuinely, like that is why we do self-reflection on races. And then I feel like, oh my God, I could go on. We could do it after all of
Yeah.
your training. You could do it about your life skills. You could do it about your parenting. You could do it about your lifestyle routine.
And
All of self-reflect on
it's,
everything.
yeah, well, and we can, you know, it's an I totally agree. It's a fundamental life skill if you are someone that cares about your path, whatever the path is, parenting or and your performance, your job, your career, right? Like we want to improve, we want to do better, we want to achieve. Maybe it's even more. I say it's more than just like podiums and goals, and like I think it's deeper. It's like I want to perform the best that I can be, which might, I don't know where the end point is. For example, in my career, like what will I do, in Mars science, right? Or maybe it's in performance, so maybe it's in sport. It's like these race reflections are the way we get better at whatever it is we want to do, right? And it extends. I just think it extends further than what most people think of, like in terms of, oh, I want a podium or I want a PR or so I completely agree. What I was going to say, I love these questions. So if you guys are listening, or for our listeners out there, like go back, pause, and write down Michelle's questions for your post race reviews and race reflections. And I think we've talked about this maybe, I can't remember if on another podcast, or maybe it's just between you and I. Sometimes I forget when we just have chatted versus like what we've put out there. But I love these questions, and I actually want to incorporate more of those. Most of the time I know what their expectations are, so I don't, but I think having
I
them
think it's good for them to
reframe,
like
right,
remind
bring
themselves, like,
themselves. Yeah.
because it's like
Yeah.
to actually think about that, like, what were my expectations? And when the
Right.
expectation is something, so like the mistake that I see occasionally with athletes when they write out what their expectation was, is that their expectation was something that was not within their control. My expectation is to place in the top half of my age group. My expectation is to, go faster than I did last time. And
Right.
like maybe that's possible, right? And so
Right.
it's not even saying like that those are just like secondary goals, because it's not like so much of that, if it's super windy and it's raining and it's whatever, and like so you didn't go faster than you did last time, or there's a head current, or there's whatever, right? Like there's reasons
Hmm.
why you could still have a really good performance, but like it wasn't reflected in the actual time. Like it was so hot and humid and everybody melted and died, but here's how
Right.
I like manage that or whatever. And so it's like,
Hmm.
but I think even when you get used to answering those questions after like every race performance you do, or even like some of your key workouts, you start to get better at framing what your expectations of yourself should be.
Right.
Right? Like you get better at like being
Yeah.
realistic, because that would be the other thing. Sometimes there's expectations that are like totally unrealistic. Like you thought you were going to run a 10-minute or, like the 10K under an
Whatever.
hour. You know what I mean? Well, like, but like your threshold pace is 11 minutes, right? Like, so it's like that your expectations were not in line with reality. Of course, like, yeah, of course you're going to be disappointed if your expectations
Right.
are not realistic.
Right.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah, I will after races, most everyone will put in some brief comments, and that's mostly around like how did it go, right? And a lot of them are like, well, sometimes positive, it went well, or, placed. I mean, if people place or they meet their podium or their PRs, that's always in the comments. Right now, I encourage people, if they've had a poor race, to take a few days, right? To remove yourself from the emotional, um, the emotional impact, right? Because as you said, it took you a few days to get to the place where you could talk about it more rationally, and that's true for almost any situation, whether it's a poor race, your proposal wasn't selected, right? Like you have to take a few, or maybe a week, or whatever it might be, however big the impact was. Maybe it was like a really big A race that was disappointing. Maybe that takes a week, right, for you to really let that set. I would say so right now, for most of all of my 70.3 and my Ironman athletes, or ultras, my run only athletes, I require fueling. Now, I say I require that. I say, what did you eat? Give me your calorie breakdowns. And if they don't want to do the carbs and calories and electrolytes, I just say, at least write it down, right? Like, what did you put in there? Because, and even though I say I require this in quotations, I would say there's probably less than 5% of the athletes over the 12 or however long I've been coaching that actually do this, which is just mind boggling to me, because it's the number one thing that will determine how you are going to perform in your next races, especially and by not writing this down, the default again is like, I didn't have enough fitness. Like, because even though we talk about this and I try to stress it, like they just go back and they forget, right? And that, it's, I didn't have enough fitness. And so therefore I need to do more. It's almost always speed work. Maybe I need to run more stairs. I need to do more hill repeats. Your fueling was you had a bottle of Gatorade for 4 hours. Like, I don't care how many hill repeats you do or how many hill sprints you do. You're not going to magically come up with enough glycogen to be able to get through that race. 1 second. My puppy is destroying the couch cover. I will be right back.
And so while Mickey's gone, I'm going to make this point about how what she just said about fueling and when you're underfueled and empty, and how the feeling of that is very, very similar to I don't have enough fitness. And I know that because like I used to do that too. Like I absolutely remember like attributing all of my like weak feeling finishes, or like when I started to lose
Mm-hmm.
power or lose pace, or like I couldn't do it anymore, like across the board, I attributed that to like I'm not fit enough, so I need to train more. And so I can like totally relate to that mindset. And so this is what I would encourage. I had an athlete say to me over the weekend, because there were a lot of athletes that I had that were racing, so that we got to do a lot of reflection type things. And it's really interesting as a coach when like when you have, you know, 8 different people that you're reflecting with, or like watching their like process of reflection. Sometimes you pick up little nuggets, but like I had one woman who, she's older and she has a really good attitude about her, like her process, you know, and she said something like, we learn by doing, you know, so like, and it was really fascinating. And I thought that's exactly right. We learn by doing. And so if you're somebody who's wondering, I wonder if like my weakness at the end of a long, hard session is because I'm not fit enough, or because I haven't fueled enough. Like if you're like, I wonder if that's me, then like there's a really pretty simple way to figure it out. And the way you would
Exactly.
figure it out
Yeah.
is by doing, right? And so next time you go do a long, hard effort like that, fuel it like a lot more than you normally would, and just see what happens, and just see, right? Because if you do that and you feel before and you feel during and you feel even more than you're comfortable with, and you think, I don't even know if this might be too much, right? But just like see. And if you end up feeling like, oh my God, that was amazing, I felt so good, oatmeal has magic powers in it, like then you'll know that, like, and that would be the thing that like that athlete said, it's like you learn by doing. So like don't take our word for it, go out and try it. Take 80 or 90 grams of carbs per hour when you're going hard, and see what
Hmm.
happens in hour
Right.
3. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
when I do that, I'm like, I'm amazed. I'm like, wow, the difference is absolute night and day.
yeah. And when you start getting scientific about what you are fueling with, right? In terms of like putting it in your training peak comments. So you remember and your coach can see. I guarantee that if you look at those trends over time, your recovery is also far better. Like you're going to
Far better.
have much less fatigue. You'll be able to back up sessions over and over and over again. Even, and I see this a lot with, well, let me see. When people under fuel races, I often see less muscular soreness because they actually weren't able to execute to their fullest potential. So they feel like they recovered very quickly because they don't have muscle fatigue because they actually weren't racing to their potential.
Because, yeah, because you couldn't push as hard.
You couldn't push, right? Because you were totally bonking, and maybe you weren't bonking like puking or whatever, because there's some people that do seriously bonk, and others that it's just you just hit the wall and you just have no energy, and then you think again, I don't have the fitness. But what I also will see for those athletes that under fuel races is a lingering fatigue, like for many days potentially. Others I have seen when they get after, post race, they refuel like a mad person, right? Then the recovery is actually pretty quick because they, one, weren't able to race to their potential. They recognize, I have had athletes that have struggled with fueling and worked with nutritionists, right, to try, because they're fueling, it's not that they're choosing not to fuel, they actually get sick, right? They do vomit, they do have GI issues, since they've had GI testing, and they've worked with really smart people to try to figure out what's going to work best for them. They've had Metcart testing, and I'm thinking of one athlete who is just a rock star, and she still struggled in Nice last year. I mean, one, the bike took her far longer than even I was expecting her to take on the bike. It was for people that did Nice, it's very, very challenging. And she ran out of nutrition and wasn't able to take in the course nutrition. So she got behind, and she knew that. And she made it further on the run than she ever has, feeling good, which is a sign that her nutrition was going much, much better than it had in the past. But it still wasn't enough. And she still did finally hit a wall and then got sick. But once she recognized that, I'm sorry, my little one is very challenging today. Once she recognized, she recovered it was her job. Like she recovered like a professional. And so, yeah, her soreness after Nice was, I mean, she was tired and sore, right? But not like she probably could have been if she had been able to get her race fueling in. Kind of going down the nutrition
It
diatribe
always comes
here.
back to that, doesn't it?
It does. It is so important for long course racing. You know, for all race reports, race reflections for those athletes, it is like write it down. But again, I even and here's also the thing, even for my athletes that have it dialed in, right? I still ask them, put it down, because in 3 years from now, let's say you change up your nutrition, right? And you're like, and you start having races that are not to your potential, or you're struggling with your nutrition. Your training peaks is a record of what worked and what didn't work. So try to be analytical about it. Put on your scientist cap and you know, again, yeah, be a scientist about it. It's so funny that people want to get really analytical about paces and speed and power, but not about, you know, what their body needs for fueling. So
Hmm.
and I understand there are legitimate cases where folks may have disordered eating, and in those situations, maybe it's not appropriate. Although I would also encourage those athletes that are uncomfortable writing down what they're eating for fueling, maybe to try to work with a therapist around that, because it's such an integral part, right? And it's not that us coaches are trying to, you know, well, I mean, we are like, it's part of our job. Like racing well, you know, in these distances requires nutrition. You know, you cannot, there's no amount of, I mean, if yeah, you are super fit, you could get farther. But even at the top levels, I mean, Lionel Sanders, right? Like he has struggled in Ironman because his fueling was not working for him for many years, right? And now he thinks maybe he found a process that is working better. Now he's had a health setback, and you know, but nutrition is just a huge component of elite racing. So for us age groupers to think that it's not important, or we just can get by going by feel, or I wasn't hungry so I didn't eat, which I actually saw an interesting study even on everyday fueling. And I know we've talked about before that you have never tracked your food and calories because you feel that your natural
I know,
instincts.
not never. It's not never.
Oh,
I've
okay,
done it
never.
before, but I
Yeah,
just thought, I don't think this leads
but
me down a healthy path.
right.
Like for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was a study on what people like, again, our assessments of hunger cues, as well as, you know, eating enough or eating too much, right? Is yeah, like when people are asked to assess, right, their fueling versus like actually weighing the food and looking at the calories, like it's way off, either way over or way under. Like it's almost impossible for us to rely on just hunger cues to get the right amount of fueling in for our daily caloric expenditures. And I think that's probably exacerbated when you add athletes into the mix who have no idea what they're actually burning when they're out exercising. And so
Hmm.
I completely agree. Like if you don't know, and if you're in a situation where like I'm so unfit or I'm so fatigued, and you know, could I be under fueling? Like you
Hmm.
probably are. It's probably your
Yeah.
fueling, or you are not fueling your sessions, and that we see this all the time, right? You're not fueling your sessions, and then you're starving later, and you overeat later at night. I mean, I would put that as like potentially one of the number one, if not the biggest nutrition issues with athletes in general, especially long course athletes that are, or long, you know, ultra runners that are in many ways, like they are looking for performance, but they're also doing it for body composition, or, you know, I'm working out to not gain weight or try to lose weight. So it's a little bit of a combination. So there's this fear around fueling your sessions, because why would you fuel your sessions if you're trying to lose weight? And it's like, well, but
Because then you can
fueling your
eat less
sessions.
later.
Right, exactly. And when you do fuel your sessions, you will eat less later because your body's not depleted.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go back
I
to
will
like
say,
race
well,
reflections.
yeah, and I will say there's an athlete that I'm working with right now that comes to mind. She's new to endurance athlete, or like endurance training and racing. She's doing her first Ironman in about 2 months. And so in some cases, your training and racing is just going to be that long that you're going to feel fatigue, and there's literally like no gel that's going to fix that feeling for you. And so like if you happen to be in that category where you're already feeling really, really well, and you're still out and you're riding, you know, for 5 hours, and you're still really tired at the end, like that's where it's like, yeah, that's fitness. Like you're new to this, and like riding 90 to 100 miles is a really big ask.
Hmm.
And so if your body's not accustomed to that, and you haven't developed the strength endurance to like ride 100 miles and feel strong in the last half hour, and you're feeling really well throughout. And so you're thinking like, I don't know what they're talking about. Like I'm feeling, this is a kind of a smaller athlete, but like she's feeling like 80 grams of carbs per hour because she's new enough
Nice.
that she's listening to everything I'm saying, which is
Good.
glorious.
Yes.
Like she didn't have any preconceived notions like coming in. She's like, I'm a blank slate. I'm like, that's absolutely perfect. So
Fantastic.
here's what you're going to do. And she's like, she trusts me. She listens to me, but she'll do a long ride like that. And she'll tell me, she'll write down everything she ate. And she's like, I don't know, man. Like it was just that last half hour was really hard. And I'm like, look, you know what? You're right. It just is right
Yeah.
now. Like that was your first 90-mile ride you've ever done. So it is completely natural and normal
Hmm.
that like you will feel tired at the end of that. And in doing it, like next time it'll go a little bit better. And like, this is why we train and this is why we ride long before we throw you into the Ironman. So that the Ironman isn't the first time you've ever, I mean, it is going to be the first time she's exercised like all day long, but like she's continuing to make progress every week and you will in endurance. And it can be the case that even if you're feeling perfectly, you can still feel
Yeah.
fatigue if and when you're stretching your
Right.
body to push harder. And that could go for a race too, right? So like it's totally possible to go do a 70.3 race, fuel it absolutely the best you can, and still be really freaking tired at the end if you were pushing right to your limit. Like we would expect you to be like, you're pushing to your limit for 5 or 6 hours, right? You fueled plenty and it's still a really big, hard effort. Like it was hot, it was humid, it was like windy, it was whatever. Like it, so don't think that, I feel the way that Mikki and Michelle told me to feel and I still felt tired. Well,
Oh,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, like you still might, but like at least then that is when it is fitness. Like
Right.
if
Right.
you're feeling at like your capacity to fuel, like, and that's basically like as much as you can without getting sick. Like if
Exactly.
you want me
Yes.
to define like how much should I eat? As much as you can without getting sick. Like that's
Yeah.
how much you're trying
That's
to
the
eat. If
goal.
you're doing that and you're still feeling tired at the end, that's when we attribute it to fitness. So yeah, like keep training.
I
That's
totally
where
agree.
like
Yep.
training is going to fix that for you. But like if you're not already feeling enough, then try that first because that will help you do the sessions that you need to do to get the fitness that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with some really smart athletes who've been you know, in the sport for 20 years or longer. And I'm thinking of one person in particular who had a pretty rough last year. And I think I may have mentioned this already, but they had a pretty rough last year, 24. And they did a 70.3 earlier in the spring, and their build was pretty short. They ramped, well, not we didn't ramp too much, right? I mean, this is again an athlete that's pretty high performer, 20 years in the sport. But going in, right, we knew that they were not carrying the fitness they normally would. The training for 3 or 4 months leading up was okay, again, but not like what they had normally would have been carrying. The fitness was lower. And what we talked about was, one, they do have a ton of race experience, and there is a component of when you're going to push above what you might be capable of, right? Like you're making a big jump in, like, let's say, for example, commonly right now, I'm not really riding that much, right? And if I wanted to go do a 4 hour bike ride, what would I do? Right? I can go do that, right? All I have to do is keep my effort level pretty steady, right? Like spread the peanut butter on very thin, thinner than you think, especially at the beginning, right? So you make sure you're not burning too many matches up front, and you fuel like your life depends on it. And that, so for this athlete, a combination of her smart pacing and race history, as well as fueling like her race depended on it, she was able to negative split the back half of the half marathon, by like, I want to say over 30 seconds per mile,
Yeah, that's
very
huge.
strong, huge. And because, and going in, of course, she was like, "Ooh, it's going to be a slog of a run." I'm like, "No, let's not talk about what it will be. We don't know what it's going to be, but what we have to do on the bike is fuel like, because we're not carrying the fitness, right? You have to fuel that really well." And she did, and she continued to fuel the run. And yeah, she didn't feel great getting off the bike because it was a longer bike ride than she's done in quite a while. Like even her bike volume was a little bit lower, but she kept fueling and her legs came around and she was able to finish strong. And so, I mean, that's like, there's so many situations where an athlete actually has a pretty good build, right? Have pretty good, like, hitting all their sessions for the most part, and then just doesn't perform because they either choose not to, or there are some athletes, and I've worked with some that have very challenging fueling problems, and so and if they're smart, they recognize that. And I think eventually the one athlete I'm thinking about who it took a few years for her to finally be convinced that it's not more fitness she needs. We need to figure out her fueling. And that meant going and getting a Met cart done to see what she was burning at different intensities, dial back some of her training to the correct efforts, and then figuring out the fueling that was going to work for her, as well as her everyday fueling. Like we had to change her everyday fueling because she had some real serious gut issues. So if you are in the camp of like, I just can't fuel, right? Or I get sick. There are athletes that, we understand that, right? I mean, I've worked with some of those athletes but there's still mechanisms to get you racing really strong under a protocol that may not look like a 90 grams per hour carbohydrate intake, right? Depending on if you're training in different zones, you may have to adjust your daily nutrition a bit so that you can build up your fitness under your metabolic crossover point. So you are burning more fat than carbohydrates than someone else that can handle. I mean, it's not to say like I keep saying you don't have, there's like different knobs you can turn, right? Like if you can eat, if you know you're a carb burner and you know that you can eat a ton on the bike, then don't worry about metabolic efficiency. Like if you know your race intensities, you know it works for you, have at it, right? But if you're someone like this athlete that I've worked with, who just couldn't, I mean, we're puking, stopping, like it's just not going to work for her, then we have to adjust and go the other route, which is to build up your fitness under your crossover point so that you're in a better range for what her body could take in carbohydrate wise.
Yeah.
It's a different process, but it's still possible. Yeah.
You mentioned
Anyways.
expectations, and I want to touch on that in maybe like through a little bit of a different lens. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this too, because like so this is going to go along with like the mindset, right? Of like, what were your expectations about like, how did you think it was going to feel? Like, what pace did you think you were going to be able to run? And I feel like when there's a couple different ways to approach like expectations of the race, right? Like if you want to be like, I'm going to have a positive mindset, like I'm going to go in and I'm going to feel great and I'm going to do the thing and I'm going to be happy and I'm just going to feel great the whole time. And I don't know about you, but like that mindset has just absolutely never, ever worked for me.
Yeah, no.
Like, because it's like lying to yourself. Like, if you think that you're going to do, and it doesn't even matter what distance you're doing. If you're running a 5K, it's really fucking hard. If you're going to run
Yeah,
a 10K, it's really fucking hard. If you're going to run a half marathon, it
you're
might
gonna go
not
hard.
be
Yeah.
really hard in the first half, but like the last 3 miles should be really fucking hard, right? If you're running a marathon, or a sprint distance triathlon, like it's really hard. An Ironman, like it doesn't matter, right? Because you're giving your best effort for the whole distance. And so while it's possible to like feel good, that doesn't mean that it feels easy or like you're just floating along and not giving effort,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so like there's figuring out where your sweet spot is there as far as, and I had this thought like when I was swimming on Saturday and I'm like literally looking at this reef and going like, am I going backwards? Like I might be going backwards. Like the water's just pushing so hard against me that like, and I was kind of mad because I was like, my expectations were we were going to have a tail current.
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
literally, in my experience in the moment was not meeting my expectations of like, we're going to have, it's a flooding tide. Like we should have a current pushing us all the way. Like this should be, it should feel like I'm moving on a freight, like I'm not moving. And I was mad because I was like, I can swim in a head current. Like if I would have had knowledge ahead of time, like, hey, you know what? This is gonna be a really hard swim. There's a head current here and like, it's going to be really hard. Like I can handle that. I eventually would have been, I think, a lot better
Mhm.
if like in handling that, it's like, just tell me it's going to be hard. And then when it is hard, I'm meeting I'm meeting my own expectations of like, I thought it was going to be hard and it is hard. And so, but it's like, you don't want to psych yourself out either like the mindset, there's this like, there's a way to do it because it's not like, it's going to be so hard. I don't know if I can do it. Like, that's
Mhm.
not the mindset you want. But it's more a matter of like, at some point, this is going to get really hard. And when it does, I'm capable of meeting the challenge. And like with that mindset, then it's like when the reality hits and it starts getting uncomfortable, your ability to stick with it and stay in that discomfort and still maintain form, maintain your positive thoughts, like keep your focus, like do the things that you know to do, stop and fuel and hydrate if you need to, like whatever your situation is. But like being realistic about how uncomfortable is actually going to be, and then meeting that discomfort with enough like confidence that like I can do this. I can meet like this challenge. I can meet this moment here. That's where I feel like the best performances come out, because it's a fallacy to think like, I think Steve Magnus has said that kind of thing too.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, if you think it's going to be easy when you're racing, like you're fooling yourself. Like it's never going to be easier, and it doesn't get easier. Like the people that are winning the race, like they had a different experience than me, because like they weren't dealing with the tail current, but I guarantee you they were working
Swimming
really
hard.
hard. Like, so as far as like who was working harder, we were both working really hard. Everybody was working as hard as they could. So it's like, don't think for half a second, if you're in the back of the field, that the people who are at the front are having an easy time. They are not. They are just maybe more comfortable being uncomfortable than you are. And so when it's uncomfortable, they're like, I understand this feeling. I can do it. I can continue to push. That I feel like is something that can be developed you can develop that in several ways, like either from racing a lot. Cause I had one athlete that swam on Saturday, and she has not been doing all the series all along. And so she's a good swimmer. She's been training in the pool, but it's like, shorter intervals in the pool. And she's been doing long ocean swims. So like we had no concern about her endurance, about her speed, about any of that. But, an hour plus race effort is a different beast, right? And it's just like, that's not something that we do. Like, even if in the open water, like maybe she's doing 30 minutes at a time of like strong focused effort, but like that's different than an hour plus race effort. And that was her reflection at the end of the race. So like what she wrote about was that like, wow, I was really unprepared for how hard that got. That like, and I was like, it definitely is a thing that I personally think the way to get good at racing in the ocean is race in the ocean.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. And
absolutely.
so it's like, there's just like not a really good replacement for that. And so I think she probably had expectations of doing better than she did. And then like when she was in it and going like, wow, this is really uncomfortable, and she didn't like love being uncomfortable. She loves like going long and being more comfortable and enjoying the swim more and like seeing the turtles or whatever. She's like, that was really hard. And I'm like, yeah, it is a skill for sure. And I do think that racing more often, so you can race your way into that feeling comfortable with uncomfortable, or there is a way to train it too, right? Like if you don't have lots of race opportunities, you can then like kind of put at the end of longer training days, put a 30-minute durability piece where it's just like, you're going to focus, you're going to lift the effort, you're going to put yourself in a place where you're uncomfortable physically. And then your whole goal going in is to train your brain that I am capable of holding this. And it is uncomfortable, and it is okay. It is okay for me to be uncomfortable. My heart is not going to explode. My lungs are not going to explode. My legs are going to keep going. I can do this. And when you show yourself that, you can give yourself evidence from your training that you can do it. And then on race day, when that's what you're experiencing, you're more likely to be able to like stick with it without getting mad. But like, yeah, I would say don't expect it to be easy. It's never going to be easy, like not ever.
What I've seen so often with my athletes that tend to be more pace focused and outcome focused is there is just go ahead and say it, like there's a lack of mental toughness there. I think they are expecting the paces to feel comfortable, maybe I don't know, I won't say comfortable, but like within their range of what they are, they deem acceptable. And so the fall offs that I see when they start to fall off the paces, right, without any like, okay, we're gonna, I mean, for the most part, I encourage heart rate, perceived effort, over pace only, right? Especially for longer races. But I know, because even if I'm coaching that, I still have athletes that are very pace focused. And as soon as they fall off whatever the paces that they deem acceptable for them, like the mental, it's just like failure, like walk, like walking, right? Or accepting that a walk might be part of their race plan. Like a lot of, and you see this all over the Ironman courses. Once people accept that they walk, they give up. And quite honestly, in
It
my
doesn't
opinion,
have to be like that
it
though.
does
Like it
not.
does not have
It
to
does
be like
not.
that. You can be like, this is part of my plan. I'm going to walk through these 8 stations, or I'm going to give myself 10 steps of walking, and then I'm going to go running again. And like, yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't have to be.
yeah, I mean, because you can break a 4 hour marathon, which would be fantastic for a lot of Ironman athletes by doing a 9-1. You're concentrated enough to get through the aid station with purpose, not lollygagging and then run your pace, right? Like you can do quite well. And I've been encouraging that more and more. Quite honestly, I think a lot of people do their long runs just too fast because I mean, I'm actually writing a Substack on how our perceived effort is actually, for most people, is pretty crap. I'm sorry. Your zone
Yeah,
three is
no.
that your zone three is actually I'm sorry, your easy run is zone three. You
Yeah,
have
yeah,
no aerobic base and you also
yeah,
can't go harder,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
for a lot of people.
I had a
So
coach tell me
yeah,
one time, you could incorporate this if you want, but he said, so many athletes have an easy meter that's broken.
yeah, exactly.
And I thought that was a really good way to put it, right? And so it's like, and because I have athletes that do that too. I'm like, oh, this was easy. And you're like, it was
Yeah,
840 pace. Like that was not easy. Like, I don't care what you know what I mean? Your brain thought it was easy, but your body did not think that was easy.
no. Yeah,
But you can fool yourself all day if you want. Just say, call
yeah,
it easy. That's an ego thing, I think,
absolutely. But I
yeah.
also I think, and this is, even looking through the data, I also think these athletes have a hard time going really hard, and
Hmm.
holding sustained effort. So
Hmm.
VO2 max intervals, even hard sweet spot intervals on the bike. When I give them work at the end of a long ride, and this actually is also true because a lot of these well, sometimes under fueling, they can't do the hard efforts at the end of the bike, or they cut their bike short because I'm too tired and I bonked or whatever it might be. So that uncomfortable. So yeah, going back to the expectations of like it's going to feel hard. How much are you willing? I hate to use the word suffer, but like how
Yeah.
uncomfortable are you willing to get? Right, to achieve what you want, whether it's maintaining a pace, whether it's placement, whether it's running down the next person in the age group, or making the podium, but it will not. Yeah, like you said, the swimmers that did beat you, right? They were working their asses off too. They just chose a better
Yeah.
line. So,
Yeah.
that
For
was,
sure.
and that's racing too. For yeah, that's part of racing. I mean, I was going to say in triathlon, with the rolling starts in triathlon, it's not quite as dynamic, but in track, right? Like if you choose a bad line, you get boxed in. I ran the 800, and there are race dynamics that matter, right? Like being able to get out when you need to go for a kick down the backstretch. Like if you can't get around and you don't have the top end speed that you need, then that was a poor strategy on your part to get where you were on that race. And that 800 is so short, but it matters, right? So
It totally does.
yeah.
And you just made me think of too, like, there's so much that we can learn from like any experience that we have in our lives, right? So like we're using racing for this, and we sort of talked about this in the beginning. Like we're using endurance racing as a vehicle to like help ourselves learn how to be better humans, right? Like just better people. And the reality is what I've experienced, and I'm sure you have too, is that there are some people who are really good at self reflection. And there's other people who just absolutely do not understand what it is. And they are like, and this is like hard for me to understand because I'm not one of them and I'm trying really hard, but I'm so frustrated by people who are not capable of self reflection. But it's like really like they're not. And I have really, I mean, this topic can be personal for me in a way that like I watch people who are incapable of self-reflection, which means that you're incapable of improving poor behavior from before that is either hurting you or hurting people around you or hurting, you know what I mean, or just like standing in the way of your progress of getting better because like you're incapable of looking back objectively. And this is my theory on it. And I don't know. And look, I'm not a trained psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever. I'm not that. But I I'm a professional pattern seeker
Exactly.
in that
Yeah.
like I watch people and I try to understand like that person is capable of, really objective self-reflection. That person is not. like literally can't do it, and you ask them self-reflection questions and they
Yeah.
defer, or
I'm
they literally
trying,
just
or, you know,
they don't know
they
how to
take
do
it
it.
they take it personal too. Like
Yeah,
something's in her, like wrong with them, like, and they
yeah.
can't
So
identify it. And
I
yeah.
think that's what
Yeah.
it is. Like there's a when your self-worth, or like how you feel deep inside about yourself is I'm not enough, I'm not worthy.
Hmm.
When there's like that really deep-seated I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, just feeling, sentiment, whatever, belief, whatever, it's deep
Hmm.
sometimes, and it may be so deep that on the surface you would be like, that's not me. And the reason that I know that is because that's what I used to be. Like I heard,
Hmm.
like if you think you're not enough, I'm like, what? No, I totally think I'm enough. But then like when I learned how to like really do self reflection, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, so yeah, like that was an issue, right?
Hmm.
But I feel like the first step in this, if you're first of all, if you're one of those people who doesn't know how to self reflect, you've probably already turned us off.
Right.
Because like none of this makes sense.
No.
So I'm
Like, where are they
probably preaching to the
rambling?
choir here, because like there's nobody listening that isn't capable of self-reflection already. So first of all, if you're still here, congratulations. Like you're
Yes.
likely capable of self-reflection. But like on the off chance that somebody like tunes in and to the back half of our podcast here, and they're like, wait a minute, I'm not sure if I'm good at that. Like know this. Being radically honest with yourself about where you're making errors is not a, a like it doesn't make you a worse person. It doesn't, like, and shining a light on like your poor decisions in the past doesn't condemn you to those poor decisions. It is literally like the way out. Like it's the way that you can stop making poor decisions and therefore have better outcomes at pick the thing, right? So like we're using endurance sports and training and racing to achieve this avenue, but it's literally in any area of your life where there's a struggle somewhere, or there's a conflict, or there's a rub, or there's something that's not going well. Like if you're able to say like, what's within my control, what's my role here, how have I done it in the past, is that working or is it not, and like be super objective with it. And if it's like it's
Hmm.
not working, okay, like how come it's not working, what could I try and do differently to see if like that might give me a better outcome, and then like just try that and see. And like maybe you find like that totally works better than what I was doing before. And when you can do it and remove the self-judgment piece of it, that it's like, I'm not a bad person because I made a bad decision. But if I believe that I'm a bad person because I made a bad decision, then I absolutely will not look at that bad decision.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like if it's like if I'm equating my self worth with like I didn't do that right, and therefore I'm a bad person, and now I'm like carrying that shame with me, then of course I'm not going to want to look at that. And so when somebody asks you to do some self-reflection, you're like, oh, I'm not going back there. I'm focused on, I've heard this from,
Oh,
like my
yeah.
parents, from everybody, like, I'm just focused on looking forward. I don't want to look back. And we're like, well, look, if I get that, I know that you don't want to look back. I know it's like painful to do, but like, if you don't look back and look at the mistakes that you've made, then the chances of you actually correcting those going forward are reduced,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Like it's not likely to happen. And it's frustrating.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, even broader, right? Of like looking at our collective histories,
Mm-hmm.
our past,
Yep.
right? And like what did we do wrong? Where are the atrocities that
Mm-hmm.
every culture has done at some point, right? In
Mm-hmm.
our history of a species, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without looking at that, I mean, the common phrase is we're doomed to make the same mistakes again, which is absolutely true. History doesn't repeat itself, and races may not repeat themselves in the exact same manner, but it's likely that, like, if you don't learn from how you fucked up the first time, like, you're going to make the same mistake in the future. And so,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I mean, whether it's races or whether it's leading a country, it's like
Yeah.
the same thing, really,
Yeah.
in terms of can we learn from our mistakes? I mean, people say there's no such thing as a failure, right? I don't know if I truly believe that or not. I can say that I have failed at things, right? Like, I failed to get a proposal selected, right? What will I do? Well, I'm going to take the feedback that I got from that proposal. I'm going to make it better and I'm going to resubmit it, right? I'm going to learn from what the, what feedback I get and what I think will make it better. And I'm going to, hopefully not just resubmit the same thing. I've also seen that from some researchers that don't take, from having sat on
Maybe
panels,
if I get a different panel that looks at
right?
it, like it'll be different people that'll
People
think it's better.
people think that. So that's a little bit of, there are some, how to phrase that. Like it's a little different than racing, right? But race conditions can change. So it's possible that people will say, well, it's a different course. So maybe it'll just magically go better, even if I don't fix my mindset or I don't fix my
Hmm.
nutrition plan, right? Like it's possible, maybe, like if you're a heavy sweater and you race in a cooler climate, then your nutrition, your hydration strategy will work. That's quite possible. But a lot of these things, it is very, very frustrating for me as well when you see an athlete that has potential or a person in that has the potential to grow and they are putting up their own roadblocks. Like it's really frustrating. I'm sure you've seen athletes do this, right? And they keep coming back and they want to work with you, but they're actually not doing, like, it almost makes me feel like I'm spinning my wheels and I'm talking to a brick wall because I'm literally like leading them to this is how you get better. And they just fight. It's just a fight. Like they just don't want to do it. I'm almost to the point, of ultimatums, like either do this or I'm gonna boot you because we're no longer. I don't want to just take people's money and coaching for me is to help people, and if people don't want to be helped, then it's a situation where I don't feel like I am being useful, and I don't want to feel
Hmm.
unuseful.
I would
So,
say it's not likely that they don't want to be helped, but it's
well,
like they think that they want to, and then but when it actually comes down to like executing on the day or doing the thing that they know, it's like a form of self sabotage. I have one
absolutely.
athlete that does that to herself a lot, and it's really interesting because she knows it. Like she knows that she's doing it, and she continues to do it. And then she's mad at herself when she knows that she's like, yeah, I self sabotage that. And so when we're talking, like she knows all the right things to say, right? And then
Hmm.
like, and what are you going to do tomorrow? Okay, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. Yeah, and she's just like, I can't wait. I'm going to do it. And then it's like when she's faced with her own like self and doing the thing, like there's some sort of roadblock. And here's the thing: whatever is getting in her way is really really deep seated and likely beyond like my capacity as like I'm an athletic coach, right? Like and while I can be a pretty good mindset coach as well, I think, and I can coach on like all the details and the things that go into this, like when there's deep seated issues of shame, or there was abuse somewhere in your past, or there was something, it's like those are things that affect self-esteem in a way that I think prevent people from taking the steps that are the appropriate ones that will actually help lead them to success. And it really like keeps them stuck because they haven't gone back and dealt with the root issue, like whatever the root issue is. And like that root issue might be like, remember when you were a kid and your dad telling you that you'll never amount to anything, right? And like that story is still stuck in your head from when you were 9 and he said that to you, and it was an imprint kind of thing. And so every time you're on the verge of like accomplishing something, you're like, I'll never
Hmm.
amount to anything, remember? And so then you're like allowing that to come true by like not addressing that thing from before. And I mean, that's one example, but it like, I think that as coaches, it's important for us to know and understand too that those athletes are likely as frustrated with themselves as we are watching that from like, so it's frustrating for us to like watch that from the outside, but it's also really frustrating for the athlete because they're like not making improvement. Then they're always going to look like, if you can't do self-reflection, you're going to look for somebody to blame.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
like you'll blame the race director for setting up the course wrong, or you'll blame the weather for being too hot or too cold. You'll blame the road conditions for being too bumpy, or that piece of glass was in there. And that's why the thing, or like you'll always find. And so maybe here's like, and maybe we should end on this unless you have a lot more to say,
No.
but like if we look at the difference between like a reason and an excuse,
Mm.
right? Because like there are times where you'll hear from an athlete, and I actually find this funny, and we've seen this online too, like not recently but in years past on Instagram. Like there was some Instagram account that was like kind of making fun of triathletes, like, and it was like a Monday morning thing, and it's like, what's your excuse for why you didn't race as well as you should have
Mm.
this weekend, right? Because like
Hmm.
everybody would come out with like their excuse and put it on social media that like, this is why I didn't perform as well as like I should have, right? And so like there's that the excuse, and like, look, sometimes it's real, like sometimes it's real, but like if it's real, then I would call it a reason. Right. So, like,
Yeah.
the reason I didn't swim as fast as I think I could have is because I chose a poor line and I ended up getting stuck in a head current. Or the reason I didn't race as well, as I could have is because I have been sick for the last couple of days and I just wasn't able to breathe as well as I normally would have. Or the reason that I couldn't is because it was way hotter than I expected and I took it out too fast and I didn't plan for like that heat or whatever, blah, blah. But the excuses are like a whole different ballgame. The excuses, well, that other athlete got in my way. Like, this
Oh
is
yeah.
where you're going to blame somebody else. The transition area was just way too long and I had to run forever. And like, they didn't put carpet on the thing. And so I was like ripping up my feet and they ran out of ice at the aid stations, or like you're going to find like an excuse or like it's somebody else's fault and like that's why you didn't perform as well as you could have. And the reason I'm pointing that out is not to like shame anyone for doing it, because it's really common to do, but it's more a matter of like, if and when we're constantly blaming somebody else for our own shortcomings, that like, we're never going to learn and get better.
Yeah.
Right. You
Yep.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take responsibility for like, these are the choices that I made. Here's the things that even in those conditions and even with that long transition and even without the ice at that last aid station, right? Like, here's what I could have done to help myself do better versus like, I'm just going to chalk it up to like, here's this excuse. Like, it's sometimes the excuses like can be valid reasons, but it's like almost like the intent behind
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's like an
Absolutely.
intent is what it is. The difference between,
Right.
I
Well,
don't know.
it's
So what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, no, I totally agree. I think in what you just said, it's like taking personal responsibility, which is a huge issue in, I think, our culture. I think not
Mm-hmm.
enough people are taking any responsibility for their actions in general, whether it's piss poor driving, right? Or it's, I mean, just how they treat each other. Everything is someone else's fault, and this is manifested in large political shifts, right? In terms of blaming and why we are where
Mm-hmm.
we are and why they,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be. Pick your issue. But it's the same thing in racing. There might be, I totally agree. Like there might be situations that impacted your race that were outside your control and may have been from someone else's poor decision or negligence or poor design, whatever it might be. But I guarantee there's also, in most cases, something that you can take ownership of in terms of what you could have done better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever it may be. So the only thing I will say is there are some athletes, and I it's almost like they take too much personal responsibility, but this is a small fraction. I think that it's like how to describe this, because I've seen it. But maybe I would almost put myself in some of these categories and like taking on more than what I um should take on, right? In terms of like it's not expectations of performance, it was expectations in what I should be able to handle, right? Or I should have,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean? I don't know how
yeah.
to exactly phrase this, but there are
No, I'm
sometimes like
Superwoman, so I can handle that. I can
yeah,
do it. I can
right,
do it
right.
all.
And in life or in racing, and that there are those situations, which is the exact opposite. I mean, it's ego driven, but it's almost like it's not because you have too much confidence. It's maybe a sign of maybe, or not confidence, like not too much ego, but like an expectation that you should just, I mean, it is ego in some ways. It's like I have this confidence that I can manage, I can overcome, I can't, whatever it might be, when in the reality is like the situation was set up in a way that like I probably really shouldn't have expected that I could have, right? Whether it be my training wasn't where it should have been, or the conditions from what I'm strong at were not to my benefit, whatever, right? Pick your reasons. But and so I think it's a lack of clear like observation, like your mind's clouded, right? Like you're not being strictly observation driven, right? In terms of being
Hmm.
realistic. I think there's that
Hmm.
component for some athletes that I put myself in that category of what I'd take on more than what probably was appropriate in some ways, whether it's racing or again, like life. Like I should have known that. I don't know, trying to make up something that a relevant example right now, but yeah, I think personal responsibility, take ownership of where, what you did well as what you may have not done as well, or maybe even potentially failed at. but I
Well,
caution.
I
Yeah,
like the way that question. So like my fourth question, I like the way it's worded because it's not like what didn't go well or what did you fail at. It's
right,
if you could go back and do it
right,
again, what would you change? What would you
yeah,
do differently? Right? Because like that gives you an opportunity then to be like, okay, if I got knowing what you know now, if I could do it again, what would I do differently? Because like by the next time, okay, those are there you go. Like that's your
right,
area of improvement that like you can
right.
work on, trying to do next time. And I feel like because hindsight is commonly 2020, as they say,
Right,
right? So if you can
right,
learn those lessons, and I feel like phrasing it in that way removes like the failure element of
right,
it, right? So
right.
it's not like
Yeah,
I failed on this thing.
right.
And if
Because
you
it's
do
really
like that
not.
word fail and you use it as like first attempt in learning, I'd like that for like the
Hmm.
fail. Like and by the way, for sure we learn more like okay, maybe not for everyone. I won't speak for everyone. I'll speak for myself. These races that don't go well, like
Hmm.
boy, they motivate me in a way that I am not motivated when things go perfectly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yep.
like the fire that like got lit under my ass to be like, I can't wait for that 5K this weekend. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's different than like what it would have been had I like swam the inside line and everything would have gone perfect and I would have, swam whatever time I should have swam. And then I wouldn't have thought very much at all about the 5K. And now I'm like, oh, okay, I know
Hmm.
for sure I have the potential to royally screw this up if I don't do it right. So I'm going to be really aware the whole time and I'm going to like, I learned a lot from that. So like, I don't know, is it a failure? No, I
No.
learned a lot.
Right. Yeah. I commonly say I fail a lot more than I actually, quote, win. However, I don't really view, I mean, I don't, yeah, failure is just one of those words where for some people it can be impactful. And if it's used in a way that, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like you're going
Yeah.
to learn from this and, yeah, you admit that like it didn't go well. Maybe you did actually fail, but yeah, I have again athletes, a few athletes. I say this. I was going to say one. Maybe it's a small percentage, but I do have some athletes that use fail a lot. A lot. I mean, in Training Peak uploads multiple times a week. Like I failed you, I failed. And this is not without me saying, like, I feel like I'm a very supportive coach. Like I am not encouraging. I have tried over the years to say, there's no failures, right? Like, what did you learn, right? So this is something, again, I think deep seated that is beyond my capabilities to probably deal with, given that I have tried all of my mindset strategies to try to reshape this mindset that they have on, I would put it in extreme negativity in terms of their capabilities and their self-worth being very tied to not only what I think, but their external, like what their partner thinks,
Hmm.
what anyone thinks about what they are, what they, how they are, how they performed, whatever. So I do in general dislike the word failure, especially when athletes use it like in a I failed or I failed. I'm like, you didn't fail me. Like, I don't really like, I do care, but not that, like, whatever. Like, you didn't fail me. I just want you to have a fun race for the most part and meet your goals, obviously. But, um, the one we're going on almost 120 here, but the one thing I was going to say about lighting the fire under, but to do better on the next race. I absolutely think that is more true for races that don't go well versus ones that do. I think that's been a big driver. We talked about this with, the women's very difficult to get to Kona, right? Like women can like, will this shift now that we have better, like we have better representation, right? It's a more fair distribution of who gets to go in terms of like how competitive you actually are, not as in comparison to like how many people sign up in your age group. And I think you had pointed this out that like, when it was really hard to get to something, like maybe that kept driving people to sign up for Ironman, right? And then once they did get that Kona slot or knee slot, they retired, right? Or they stepped away, which I
I
did.
mean, that
I
was
mean,
reflected in the
yeah,
numbers. There were a lot of
that
people
is.
that
Yeah,
like I've been doing
yeah.
Ironman for 10 years and I finally got to Kona and like
And now I'm
checked
gonna
the box and now I'm moving
done.
on. I'm going to go have my kid. I'm going to go do this with my job. I'm going to like
Right,
literally like got out of the sport of triathlon.
right, right. So that's a real thing. And a consideration, right, in terms of like what drives you. But I
Hmm.
think and I have again a few athletes over the years that almost never do race reflections, and it's always next on to the next thing because they need that like next thing, that next hit, that next looking forward because the next race might be better again for some reason, or they're going to meet their expectations, which are usually outcome driven, right? To get the placement, get the podium. And I think by not doing these real, race reflections, and if you're in this, if you find yourself as someone that races a lot, right? And you're like, well, I'm racing a lot because I want something. Like, what is that something? Is it the placement? Or is it to just have the race that you know you're capable of? Like in your situation, I know why you're going to do the 5K, because you're capable of having a really strong 5K. And maybe it is also some outcome driven results that you want, and that's totally fine. And you've done the work, right, to know like what you want to
It's
do
interesting. My
differently.
outcome, my personal perspective on the outcome thing has really shifted over the years. Like, um, like I want to have the outcome I deserve, but also like it, like when I feel good about what I did, I don't, and like if I feel good about what I did, everyone who beat me, congratulations.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
literally, that's it. Like congratulations,
Right.
like you did great.
Right.
Because like if I feel good about what I did, then I would expect that I'm one of the faster ones. I'm going to be up there. And so if you're ahead of me, I know the work I did. And if you're ahead of me, if you're especially in
Right.
my age group, you're 50 something and you're ahead of me, congratulations. Right?
Right.
Because like I know how hard I work, and if you're beating me, then like you've done it too. Like I just don't think it's like super lucky to
Right.
like you've done a
Right.
lot of work, so congratulations, like you have earned respect. So like it's interesting how like I would rather have people like to competing, like I want people to compete, I want people to be there, like I don't want to just win, like it's so hollow to win when there's nobody fast
I
in your age
agree.
group.
Yeah.
So hollow. Like I would rather get second. I would rather like go have a great race, get second or third, and then have something to chase instead of like there's like I won by 4 minutes and there's nobody here,
I
right? Like
totally agree. I
I
love the competition, right? Like in the chase and the,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think that there are people that race for different reasons, and that is showing, well, maybe this is bias of me, I suppose, because who am I to say, like, you have your own reasons. As long as you can validate and you can feel good about your reasons, that's great. I tend to be more on in your philosophy of like, if I am showing up and giving my absolute best, that's all I can ask of my body on the day. And if other people beat me, congratulations to them. But I know that that's not common, right? I mean, I don't know
It
what the
took me
percentage.
decades to get there. It took me decades to get here. I mean, this is not how I wish I would have had this mindset when I was racing
Well,
triathlon. I didn't have it then. I didn't. Everybody who beat me was an absolute threat in the
yeah,
past.
I
Like if you
didn't.
beat me, you were a threat, and I didn't like it. And so like that was a really immature. Like I was
I
not
don't.
good at that.
I did not. I did not have. I don't know if I've ever really had that, to be honest. Even from as a young age, like I've really been internally driven to be my
Mm.
best. And if other people beat me, I respected them, and I may have looked up to them, and I wanted to learn from them. I don't know, and I know that's maybe a little bit rare. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think the thing is what it is. It's like it can be developed. And so I would
Yeah.
say I have developed that
Yeah.
desire to
Yeah.
be my best. Previously, I wanted to be the best. Right. And like, and I don't know what I thought that meant. That meant it was, and I do know what it meant. When I am happy with myself in pick an area, right? And that could be like my whole life, could be my parenting, could be my relationships, my job, my health, my, like my training, when I'm happy with with what I'm doing, then I'm so much less likely to be comparing myself to other people and caring about what other people think or if other people are beating me than when I'm insecure in myself. I'm not happy with how
Mm-hmm.
things are going with me. Then it's like I need validation or proof or something that I'm worthy by
Mm,
beating you.
yeah.
Right. And so then it's like so it has everything to do with how I feel about myself. And as soon as I did like that kind of self-reflection work where it's like, where now I'm operating my life in a way where like I'm happy and content, like I'm good.
Hmm.
And from there, I can have a good race or a bad race, and I can be happy for people who beat me. And my bad races, I can
Hmm.
look at objectively and honestly without thinking like I'm a bad person. It's actually a really cool place to be. I don't know, like, I mean, you apparently have it. So congratulations to maybe your parents who raised you that
No,
way.
no, I don't. I don't.
I don't know where you got it, but like honestly, if you could learn like how you got that, because it's like teaching it, like if everybody could get here, like I think our whole world would be better,
Well, I
right?
thank
And
you.
pick
Yeah,
an area.
I don't know. I will preface. So while I may have excelled in some aspects of this type of competition and race and like having that objectivity or whatever, I will also say that I struggled pretty massively with negative self image, right? And so while I held maybe a healthier relationship with racing or sport. I mean, soccer was my passion as a kid through college. Yeah, and I still wanted to be the best, right? But it was less. I just didn't have. I didn't compare to other people. It was more about what I thought I was. Uh, I, as silly as it sounds now, is like being better than yesterday, right? I embraced that philosophy for a long, long time. And when you're young, you have a better chance of actually being better than yesterday because your hormones are fantastic and you can recover like nobody's business. But I just want to say, like, I mean, I have struggled in other areas, right, of my life that self-sabotage, like there was a lot of self-sabotaging because I didn't have a lot of confidence in like my vision of myself, and if that makes sense. So there I've had to do
Mm-hmm.
reflection. It's just been a different path than maybe some athletes in terms of like that competition and like trying to like I didn't feel others were threatening to me. The only time I got, I would say, into the mindset of like, what's the word I'm looking for, like uber competitive with my competitors, was when I felt wronged. And that
Mm,
showed in sport, like if there were dirty players, if there were
mm,
people
mm-hmm. They
that
were drafting. You're like,
right,
what?
like,
You're in that draft
yeah,
back. I
like
saw you in that draft back. Yeah, that
that is
drove me
when
nuts too.
that's triggering for me, and that's when I want, and then I would set out, or they were just shitty people, right? And they were very, and we can talk about this offline, but there was someone that wanted
Yeah, should we
to
stop
be,
recording now?
yeah, that wanted to be competitive
By the
with
way,
me,
if you're still listening now you get
like,
the scoop. Like, tell
right.
us.
Yeah, well, but it was like there was, to be honest, there was really no competition, but they felt a drive to be competitive with me for some bizarre reason, which
Mm,
I don't know if I
hmm
manifested that. I don't know what it was, but then I was like, okay, it's my job to absolutely crush you because you're such a shitty person.
I know
So
that feeling
there,
really well too.
yeah.
Like, if you're going to be competitive with me, you want to do that? You want to
Yeah,
do
you want
that?
to do
All
that?
right, let's
Okay, we'll
fucking go.
go. Yeah. So that is where like I have let that into my life, right? In terms of like yeah, so I don't know. We are getting into gossip time, which
Yeah.
might be more interesting than anything else. But yeah, I think self-reflection, race reflection, self-reflection is such an important. The best athletes have this ability, truly, and so being able to look objectively at your races and follow those 5 questions that Michelle laid out, which I need to also jot down again. I tend to be very analytical. I just want to know what you ate and your mindset. Like if there were negative mindset, if there's negativity that came up, what were those thoughts and how are we going to solve them moving forward? So I do some of those post race types of questions, but I like the way you structure yours. I think is a bit better for folks that are maybe not as analytical as I am in terms of giving me the feedback, even without, delving down into some of the details, although I still want those details. So, especially
Mm,
around nutrition.
yeah.
So, anything else that you want to recap on that?
Like, not right now, but next time, I feel like next time I want to talk about the way we move.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's,
People don't think about it at all. And I feel like it's really important and it matters a lot. And it matters a lot. And I have some athletes that think about it. Most of them don't. I'd say I have a few athletes that think about it. Most of them don't. And I feel like it matters so much more and it's so overlooked. But there's a degree of self awareness. So it goes along with this because there's a degree of self awareness in even understanding how you're moving and why you're moving that way. So
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. At
that's,
some point,
I
I'd
think
like
that's a
to
good
talk
one.
about that. Yeah.
That'll be I like that topic. And I think there's lots that we can delve into on that. I've got some newer athletes that I think both have asked me about run form, which I have lots of
You're
thoughts
like,
on. Yeah.
I have lots of thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah, let's talk about that next time.
all right. Sounds good. Well, it's good
Okay.
talking to you, Michelle. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Aloha.